Welcome to Dimensions in Chumash by Rabbi Immanuel Bernstein, part of our collective Journeys in Torah. Welcome to Dimensions in Chumash. I'm Steve Geller. My friends, prepare yourself for two famous concepts in Judaism that you've all heard before to be colored in with amazing details that will blow your mind. Let's jump right in. In our Parsha, do not follow the majority to do evil. Do not respond with your opinion. In a dispute, to lean to one side, achrei rabim lahatos. Incline the matter after the majority. Parshas Mishpatim introduces us to the world of Torah laws between people. The Beis Din is the center of this world. Their job is to determine which party is guilty in any given dispute and then administer the appropriate justice. One of the bedrock principles for deciding Torah law is expressed in our pasuk. In the event that the judges of a Beis Din are not all in agreement as to what the ruling should be regarding a particular question, the Torah states that they should rule in accordance with the majority opinion among the judges. And we can ask, why is this so? On the one hand, the judges have to do something. It's not practical to hold off on the ruling on any case unless all judges unanimously agree. But on the other hand, there's still room to consider the significance of this principle and its implications regarding the outvoted minority opinion. It's definitely not impossible that the minority opinion is the correct one. But in our journey to answer this question, we will learn the very meaning of the concept that we call halacha, Torah law. There's two possible ways to respond to the above question. The Torah could simply be endorsing the idea that the majority is more likely to arrive at the correct conclusion, and therefore it should be followed. According to this approach, there does exist the possibility that the actual halacha was arrived at by the minority. Nevertheless, as a rule, the truth will more likely rest with the majority, and therefore their opinion is to be followed in all cases. It's also possible that in telling us to follow the majority, the Torah is defining for us what halacha is. Halacha, Torah law, is by definition the conclusion of the majority of qualified judges on a Beis Din. Halacha literally translates as going. The way that Hashem wants us to go in life is in accordance with what the majority of Beis Din decides. This second approach would appear to be corroborated by the fact that we follow the majority even in a case where we are informed of the correct decision directly from heaven. This very situation is famously described in the dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the sages regarding whether a certain oven was susceptible to receiving ritual contamination or not. Initially, Rabbi Eliezer advances all the arguments for his position, but these were not accepted by the sages. At that stage, Rabbi Eliezer called for all sorts of miracles to demonstrate his opinion was correct, all of which were ignored by the sages. He then said to them, "If the halacha is like me, let them prove it from heaven." A heavenly voice, a bas call, issued forth and said, "Why do you take issue with Rabbi Eliezer, whom the halacha follows in all places?" Rabbi Yehoshua stood up on his feet and said, "Lo bashamayim he." It, the Torah, is not in heaven. What is the meaning of lo bashamayim he? It's not in heaven. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, for the Torah has already been given from Sinai. We do not pay attention to a bas call, for you, Hashem, have already written in the Torah at Har Sinai, the matter shall be inclined toward the majority. With these three words, lo bashamayim he, Rabbi Yehoshua encapsulated the halacha's attitude toward heavenly intervention in matters of halacha. The arena of halachic discussion is solely in the earthly Beis Din, and the tools for deciding the halacha are those that were handed down to the judges along with the Torah at Sinai. And when we are in disagreement, we do what the Torah itself says to do. We follow the majority. The Rambam, in his introduction to his commentary in the Mishnah, phrases the matter this way: and know that prophecy influences neither the explanations of the Torah nor the deriving of the details of its commandments through the principles of exegetical derivation. Rather, the way Yehoshua and Pinchas conducted their investigation and reasoning is the same way Ravina and Ravashi performed theirs. God has not allowed us to learn from prophets, rather only from Chachamim, men of reasoning and knowledge. The Torah does not say, you shall come to the prophet who will be in those days. Rather, you shall come to the Kohen and to the judge. But why is this so? How can we assume that a bas kol, a voice emanating from heaven, does not represent the ultimate truth? Because if that's the case, how can we ignore it? In the case cited by the Gemara, didn't the bas kol siding with Rabbi Eliezer indicate that, in this case, the majority of sages were in error? But now in our discussion, we understand why a heavenly voice is inadmissible in the Beis Din. because even if it represents the theoretical true answer, it does not define the halacha as Hashem wishes us to follow it. This is why the sages ignored the bas kol, which supported Rabbi Eliezer's view. This explanation of why we ignore a bas kol fits very well with the second answer offered above as to why we follow the majority, namely, the majority defines the halacha. But again, in accordance to the answer that the majority is simply more likely to find the correct answer, why did the sages ignore it when it was presented to them in the form of a heavenly voice? The Chassam Sofer explains that according to this approach, the principle of lo b'shamayim he exists as a mean to protect the halacha. If a heavenly voice were admissible as a basis for halachic ruling, it would lead to a breakdown of effective halachic adjudication. Any person would simply say that his ruling is based on a heavenly voice, thereby placing it beyond any potential investigation or refutation. Therefore, the Torah demands that halachic rulings must be based solely on evidence and arguments that can be debated and authenticated. An interesting difference between these two approaches would be a situation where the Beis Din is unable to reach a decision with regard to a certain case. In that event, would they be allowed to follow the ruling of a bas kol? Well, according to the Chassam Sofer's approach of protecting the halacha, a bas kol is universally inadmissible in a halachic discussion. Therefore, it would be unacceptable even if there were no other means of determining the halacha. So according to the second approach, that of defining halacha, Beis Din's inability to determine the halacha on their own should then be entitled to follow a bas kol as a way of protecting the halacha. Bottom line, according to numerous commentators, the shift of authority from heaven to earth in deciding the halacha is the realization of the term Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. In other words, not only were the mitzvahs of the Torah transmitted to us to fulfill, but the ability to determine the halacha in any given situation was transferred to us. Isn't that beautiful? In his introduction to the first volume of his Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal discusses this concept of the Torah being not in heaven as it applies throughout the generations. By definition, this means that there has to be a mechanism where the Torah scholars of each generation are qualified to make halachic rulings. He writes, after having mastered the relevant sources and accompanied by the fear of heaven, the scholar should engage himself in the question and issue the ruling that he feels is correct. And while it's possible that his ruling is in error, the Torah is lo b'shamayim he. It's not in heaven, and he has acted properly in delivering the answer which he believes to be correct. With all this in mind, Rav Moshe refers to the Gemara in Menachos, which relates that when Moshe ascended the mountain to receive the Torah, he found Hashem attaching vertical lines or crowns to the tops of certain letters. When Moshe asked about the purpose of these crowns, Hashem responded that in the future, Rabbi Akiva would expound halachas from them. Why are these lines above the letters called crowns? Rav Moshe explains that part of the process of Hashem giving the Torah to the Jewish people is that he also grants them the authority to derive halachic rulings based on their understanding of the words written inside. Therefore, the crown, which represents that very authority, has passed to the letters and words themselves, for it's the sage's understanding of those words and letters which will ultimately determine the halacha. Just unbelievable. And with that, once again, Rabbi Bernstein has completely reintroduced two amazing mystical concepts, lo b'shamayim he and the crowns on the letters. We now understand the miraculous depth and meaning in everything our Torah teaches, and part of our journey of learning these dimensions is to share them when we see them. That's why I hope you will like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the share button to paste the link to this video into emails and texts to family and friends. Klal Yisrael is on this journey through Torah together, and Talmud Torah is the greatest thing we can share.